Welcome back, Kauai. As we all know, general election, that's right, general election 2018 is right around the corner. We were invited by one of the Kauai County Council candidates to visit her at her neighborhood and at her home there in Kilauea. Let's get to meet up close Felicia Cowden, candidate for Kauai County Council.
Hey Dicky, thank you so much for coming to my house. It's like a perfect environment to really help people understand what is the main element of what motivates me. Like you can see right here, my house, I live in a plantation house here in Kilauea. I feel so fortunate, and every day it reminds me of the rich history that we've had here on the islands. And like if you check it out, look around, this is part of what happened for me. I've done a whole lot of things. I've had a lot of experience. I'm gonna brush you up on a number of them, but right now while we're here in my yard, you can see all this plants. I call this my yarden. And this came out of my school. I had an alternative middle school here for a time, and it was called Kauai Learning. So a resilient Kauai, a resilient environment begins with growing our own food like we once did. I've experimented with our Akamai backyard myself. What I've learned is this also greatly reduces trash and the amount of driving I have to do. As a candidate, one of my motivations is I see many people are being squeezed off the island and we are losing our rural Kauai lifestyle. So my priorities as a council person, first off is to address the housing crisis. And parallel to that, we need to strengthen our infrastructure. I understand all this requires money and that supply is limited, so partnerships are key. We need to look at what the people are doing anyway, and at least for housing, build on that with them. When I look at the difficulties people have, social justice happens more easily when people have a roof over their head and healthy food in their stomach. We all win when we all win. It's better to help all of us together. And finally, we need to be more efficient. The county, state, and federal government are in a pattern of expensive investment, so fiscal responsibility is critical. I have a number of life experiences that build a strong foundation for being a council person, including a financially difficult childhood. My professional background includes engineering at Intel Corporation when I was really young. I've also taught at Hanalei and Kilauea elementary schools, as well as had my own alternative middle school called Akamai Learning. I had 18 years as a business owner at Hanalei Surf Company, 10 years in media with KKCR, and more recently, Hawaii Television. Beyond that, I've been on multiple boards and I've had decades of government interface. You may or may not know, but I ran for county council in 2014, and I learned so much. I really focused on learning about the part of the community that I didn't already know. And I was honored. I lost by about 360 votes, something like that. It was a very narrow margin. And in that process, I was making sure that I was prepared. While I have been going to council meetings and going to the legislature and elements like that for, throughout being a business person. And throughout being, I was the president of the North Shore Business Council for 9 years, president or vice president. I was on there for 13 years. We were really looking after business interests. I started going to the council all the time when I was running for office, and honestly, I haven't stopped because there's so many pieces that are so important. And people underestimate the impact that council has and how important it is to be paying attention. And another little part of my experience that came out of teaching school, I'm also a public affairs programmer on Kauai Community Radio. So I get calls from all kinds of listeners. I try and keep my happiness to bummer ratio at least 2 to 1, but in some ways I'm like the complaint department of the island, and so when people would tell me something they're concerned about, I go and I really look and I do a little bit of investigative journalism, because it's important to be separating fact from fears and to be looking at what really is the issue there. So I've been moderating and mediating on the radio on community concerns. And so very much of that brings us both to the legislature, even looking at the federal government, and then certainly looking at the county council. So I've been going for 4 years, and in 2016 a number of people asked me to run, and I thought that I would, but I really wasn't feeling it. 2018 came around, I thought, you know, it takes a lot to go out there and put your face and your name in front of people and to ask people to vote for you. And I think that the cathartic change that happened for me was the flood of 2018. And I went out to Haena and Wainiha shortly after the flood. And you know, I went out there thinking I'm not a big, strong man, I don't have a chainsaw, but I just felt really compelled to go out there and see if I could help. And I spent a total of about 6 days there in the first 2 weeks, and I saw very much that I could help. And what I also saw, which reminded me back to Hurricane Iniki time, is the capacity of the people to really solve their own problems and how loving and kind it is. And it was so wonderful to see folks from Keikaha and Waimea and all these people from everywhere sending help, coming out and helping. And even out there while I was doing it, like I didn't go out there to help because I was running for office. I'm running for office because I went out there to help. After I got back on the boat, back then you couldn't drive in the convoy. After I got back off the boat, somewhere just deep in my now, I felt like, oh, I was leaving my family and I was leaving this big responsibility. And what I know, when I look at all the candidates running, like there's a lot of really wonderful people that are on that list, really good things, and I feel like, what do I have to offer? What am I bringing to the table that isn't there already? Well, number one, I have the time, and not only do I have the time, I spend the time without being paid for it and spending my own money. I'm going to Oahu to help different people's issues. I'm going over there working with all the different branches of the government. I have a relationship with these different layers of government. And I've been paying attention, and the county feels like my family. I have people that ask me, hey, why don't you run for House of Representatives? I don't want to. This is my home. I don't relate to being on Oahu. I relate to being right here. And so I have the time to do it. My kids are 20 and 23 now. So I'm not even focused on them. I could have worse problems than 2 sons who are successfully launched and on their own. I'm not sure if I'm ready to be on my own, but they are. So I happily have the time, and I've been a caregiver to the community, and I feel like this is really my calling. And I have relationships with the different department heads, the different people. I feel completely ready and prepared. That doesn't mean I know everything. I don't want to be on there with 7 Felicias. I just need one of those positions. And I want to be on there with people who have all different kinds of diversity. I've spent a lot of time looking at the other sides of the island from where I live. I have had all of my 35 years, I've lived here for 35 years, on the North Shore, everywhere from Pila to the end of the road. And I'll tell you, you need to have representation from every different area, every different demographic. And what we're seeing, especially with these landslides, especially like with the washout at Veke Road, a lot of the problems, part of it, I think really honestly wouldn't have happened if there was strong representation from our community, because we know how the waters run off the land. We know what happens with the floods. We know what goes on. And I don't know everything, but I know an awful lot of people collectively. I have a good communication area with all those different people in my community. So, okay, number one, I have the time. Number two, I don't have any conflict of interest. I don't have an employer that people might question, why am I working for them? Or why am I doing both of these things? I'm not spread out. And then number three, I have, what I think is really fresh is I have my radio show. I have my media group where I have been spending a decade listening to people and helping amplify their voices. And, you know, We'll have to step that up even more deeply solid for trying to make sure all the facts are there. But that's what I've been trying to do anyway, you know, but I'll be in a better position to be able to be bringing that voice out more strongly, and I bring policy to the people. One of the things that I do, I run around with this little stabilizer and I live stream all of these candidate forums and these meetings and events. And not only am I spreading that so people can be there, they can be more informed. Every single one I go to, I learn something. I learn from all of these different leaders, from our federal representatives, from the people who are challenging them, to the different county leaders, the different legislators. So I tend to be a great networker. So thank you for listening. I want to just restate my main points. Definitely housing. I understand that's like at the jugular of our challenges. Infrastructure is the sister element right there. We need to be working on our infrastructure. Social justice follows right along with it. If people have a roof over their heads and a house to sleep in, we're a long way towards making things right. Fiscal responsibility, another key thing. We need to keep our house in order. My business experience is going to be able to help me with that. Environmental resilience. As we've seen with the food and all of those pieces that we have together, that's key for me. Supporting our veterans, supporting our elders, all those pieces, you're going to see that I have a complete interest and be looking at that. So I was very, very honored and humbled to do so well in the primary. Thank you so much for your vote in that election. I need it again in the general election. I will be there for you without conflict of interest, without any reason to recuse myself. You will be, and this job will be, my #1 priority for both Kauai and Ni'ihau. We will work to make sure all of our different people groups, different interests are reflected and cared for. My number again, 652-4363. Please call me if you have an interest or a concern or a question. Felicia Cowden at gmail.com. And again, I humbly ask for your vote at the general election, November 6th. Thank you so much.